She had always been quiet. Even in her own home, she preferred corners, soft voices, and gentle routines that did not draw attention. People often noticed her for her silence rather than her presence. She moved through the world carefully, observing, listening, and never rushing to be part of the noise. But music was different. Music was where she came alive, even if no one else saw it. When she played, it was as if her soul was speaking, telling stories that words could never capture. The piano had been her companion since she was very young. Its keys felt like extensions of her fingers, almost like an old friend who understood every mood, every thought, every heartbeat. On that day, she walked slowly down the narrow streets of her town. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, casting soft patterns on the sidewalk. Her hands were tucked into her coat pockets, and a small bag with sheet music swung lightly at her side. She had no plans to perform that evening. In fact, she had planned nothing more than to sit quietly and listen. The town's music gathering was a casual affair, held in a small hall that smelled faintly of polished wood and old books. She liked the place. It was warm, welcoming, and not too crowded. Yet even here she felt nervous. Being in public was never easy, and crowds had always made her heart race no matter how small. As she entered, she noticed the familiar faces of musicians setting up. Some were chatting loudly, laughing with excitement. Others were checking their instruments, running fingers over strings or striking keys softly to test the sound. The room was alive with energy, but she stayed at the back near the door, letting others take the spotlight. She didn't want anyone to notice her. Her heart beat a little faster as she scanned the room. There was a mix of anticipation and casual chatter, a hum of excitement she could feel in her chest. She found an empty chair in the corner and settled there, opening her bag slowly to peek at the sheet music inside. The notes were familiar, comforting. They reminded her of hours spent practicing alone, of moments when no one else existed but her and the piano. She noticed a few people glance her way. A musician here, a visitor there. Some smiled politely, expecting her to greet them. She offered a shy nod in return, then lowered her gaze, letting her hair fall over her face slightly, as if hiding behind it could make the room less overwhelming. She was not unfriendly, but she had always found the act of introducing herself, of stepping forward, exhausting. It was easier to remain quiet, to observe, to let others take the lead. Yet even in her quietness, there was something about her. People sometimes felt it, a calmness, a soft presence, a sense that she carried something precious inside, even if they did not yet understand what it was. Minutes passed, and the first performances began. The music floated through the hall, sometimes light and playful, sometimes deep and serious. She listened quietly, letting each melody wash over her, feeling a connection she could not explain. Every note resonated with something inside her, and though she remained in her corner, she tapped her fingers lightly on her bag, keeping time secretly, as if she could not resist the rhythm. Music was more than sound. It was life itself, and she lived it deeply, though most of the world never saw. Then something unexpected happened. The organizer of the event, a tall, energetic woman who loved music more than anything, came bustling around, checking that everyone was ready. She stopped near the shy woman and looked at her curiously. "Are you going to play today?" she asked, a note of surprise in her voice. The shy woman shook her head quickly, almost instinctively. "No, I'm just here to watch," she murmured softly. The words felt like armor, protecting her from attention, from expectation, from the spotlight that made her feel so exposed. The organizer smiled, though a little puzzled. "That's fine," she said, and moved on. But fate had other plans. A few minutes later, the organizer's expression changed. She had just learned that one of the scheduled performers could not make it. Panic flickered in her eyes for a moment. Then she glanced toward the shy woman again. "Could you, maybe fill in?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. The shy woman froze. Her hands gripped her bag tightly, her heart pounding. Fill in? She had never performed in front of a crowd like this before. Her mind raced. Could she do it? Should she? What if she failed? What if people laughed? Her fingers itched. Not to grab the microphone, but to touch the piano, to let the music flow. But the fear was heavy, pressing down on her chest like a weight she could not lift. She wanted to say no, wanted to retreat into the safety of her corner, to shrink back and vanish. But she hesitated. The hall was full of people, their eyes quietly scanning, waiting, unaware of the inner struggle she faced. Something stirred inside her, a mix of fear, responsibility, and a strange sense of purpose. She could not explain it, but she felt that she was meant to play, even if her voice trembled and her body shook. With a deep breath, she nodded softly. The organizer's face lit up with relief, and she guided the shy woman gently toward the piano. Each step felt heavier than the last, each footfall echoing in her chest. She tried to focus, tried to steady her breathing, but the nerves were relentless, a storm she could not calm. As she reached the piano, she paused, placing her hands lightly on the keys without pressing them. She looked at the audience, catching glimpses of people who had not yet realized she would perform. Some were still chatting, others were glancing around curiously. She took another deep breath, feeling the familiar texture of the keys beneath her fingertips. The piano was steady, solid, waiting silently for her to awaken its voice. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the music she had played alone countless times, feeling the melodies in her mind as if they were alive. The first note was a choice, a leap of faith, and she felt the fear and excitement mingling into something almost electric. Then she played. The first notes were soft, tentative, almost unsure. They did not carry the full force of her skill yet, but there was a subtle beauty in their gentleness. The audience heard the music, and though it was quiet at first, there was something unmistakable in the tone, something different from the other performances. People began to pause, turning their attention to her. They noticed the way her fingers moved, the careful precision, the delicate touch. There was a fragility, yes, but also a depth, a hint of something extraordinary hidden behind her shyness. With each passing moment, her confidence grew, almost without her realizing it. The music began to flow more freely, her fingers dancing across the keys with grace and power. It was as if the piano had always been waiting for this moment, as if it recognized her presence and responded to her touch. The timid woman who had entered the hall quietly, nearly invisible, was transforming before everyone's eyes. The audience leaned forward, silent now, listening intently to the melodies that filled the room. Each note was a story, each chord a confession. She was speaking without words, telling tales of longing, joy, fear, and hope. The music held them all, binding the listeners together in a quiet, shared wonder. She barely noticed the audience. Her world had shrunk to the piano and the music itself. The hall, the lights, the people, all faded into the background. Her heart still beat rapidly, but it was no longer panic. It was energy, a pulse of life that fed into every note she played. She remembered hours of practice, of sitting alone in her room, of learning each piece with patience and care. All of it had led to this moment. All of it had prepared her to transform fear into beauty, hesitation into expression. She let herself be carried by the music, letting her soul guide her hands in ways she had never imagined possible. By the end of her first piece, a strange hush fell over the room. It was not silence alone, but a kind of reverent pause, a moment where time seemed to slow. People looked at each other, astonished, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The shy woman, unaware of the impact she had made, took a quiet breath and smiled faintly to herself. She had faced her fear. She had trusted the music. And in doing so, she had revealed a part of herself that no one had ever seen before. A part that was brave, expressive, and deeply alive. For the first time that day, she felt a small spark of something new. Confidence, perhaps, or hope. She had stepped into the light, even if only for a moment, and found that it did not burn her. Instead, it embraced her, welcomed her, and celebrated the gift she had always known she carried within. And though the performance was just beginning in the minds of the audience, for her, it was a beginning too, a promise that the music could carry her further than she had ever dared to dream. The applause for her first piece was polite at first, hesitant almost, as if the audience was unsure what they had just witnessed. She could hear it, a soft wave of clapping that grew slowly, rising in strength as the room realized what they were hearing. Her heart thumped, not with fear this time, but with a strange mix of pride and nervous energy. She had always dreamed of music being understood, of her melodies reaching others in ways words never could, and now it was happening. Still, the thought of continuing terrified her. She had only planned to play a few notes, perhaps a simple piece, something familiar and safe. But the organizer, glowing with relief and excitement, leaned forward and whispered urgently, "There's time for another piece. Will you play again?" The shy woman's hands trembled slightly as they hovered over the piano keys. Another piece. The audience expected her to continue, and though she longed to retreat to her quiet corner, something inside her resisted. The gentle encouragement of those who believed in her, even strangers, pushed her forward. She took a deep breath and nodded softly. There was no time for hesitation now. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling their smooth, familiar texture, and let herself sink into the music she knew so well. At first, the melody was tentative, cautious, as if testing the waters. But she quickly found her rhythm, allowing her mind to drift into the patterns of the notes. Music was her home, her sanctuary, and the piano was her voice. With every chord, every scale, her fear began to melt into something else. Focus, passion, and a quiet confidence she had never noticed before. The audience leaned in without realizing it, drawn by a force they could not yet name. There was a tension in the air, a shared anticipation that built with each note. She had always practiced alone, in the privacy of her room, where mistakes could go unnoticed and encouragement was self-given. Performing for others was a different world entirely, one where errors felt magnified and every movement was scrutinized. Her fingers hovered over a difficult passage, a section she had played flawlessly dozens of times, yet now threatened to stumble under the weight of expectation. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a silent breath, and remembered the countless hours of practice, the memories of quiet nights, of fingers aching but persistent, of her heart learning the language of the piano. All of it grounded her. She struck the keys with renewed purpose, and the music poured forth, richer and more expressive than she had imagined. The audience responded immediately. Their initial uncertainty faded as they heard the depth of her playing. They could feel the story in her music, the emotions she had tucked away for so long. Some leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, almost afraid to breathe and disturb the moment. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, feeling something unspoken yet profoundly familiar. There was awe, certainly, but also a quiet intimacy, as though the shy woman's music was speaking directly to each listener, reaching into hidden corners of the heart. It was not just technical skill that amazed them. Anyone could play the notes, but the way she wove emotion into every phrase was extraordinary. The soft touches, the sudden crescendos, the gentle pauses that made the following chords even more powerful, all of it revealed a deep understanding of music, of life, of feeling itself. Even those who had been skeptical, who had assumed that a shy woman could only produce timid, delicate tunes, now sat in disbelief. They had expected modesty and restraint, and instead they were witnessing mastery, an effortless flow of beauty and emotion. As she continued, she felt a subtle shift within herself. The nervousness that had gripped her in the moments before she sat down began to transform. Her hands moved faster, more confidently, yet never lost the tenderness that made her music special. The fear of judgment seemed to vanish. She was no longer playing for others. She was playing for herself, for the piano, for the joy of creation, and in doing so she realized something she had never admitted even to herself. She was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The shy, quiet part of her that had always held her back was beginning to fade, replaced by a strength she had only felt when her fingers danced alone on the keys at midnight. The organizer watched from the side, unable to hide her astonishment. She had seen many performers in her life, some confident, some skilled, but few had the combination of technical precision and emotional depth that this woman displayed. It was as though the music had a life of its own, and the shy woman was simply the vessel through which it flowed. Every chord told a story, every melody a confession. And yet, despite the power she projected through the piano, there was a humility in her posture, a softness in her gaze, that made the experience feel intimate, personal. The audience could sense the transformation taking place. The timid, almost invisible woman they had first noticed in the corner of the room had become a force they could not ignore. Whispers rippled through the crowd, subtle murmurs of astonishment. Some exchanged glances, shaking their heads in disbelief, while others simply sat silently captivated. Even those who had come expecting light entertainment found themselves caught in the gravity of her performance. It was not just music. It was a revelation, a reminder of the beauty that could emerge from the quietest, most unassuming corners of the world. Midway through her second piece, a slight mistake threatened to interrupt the flow. A note lingered longer than intended, a chord felt slightly off. For a moment her chest tightened, and she felt the familiar sting of fear. But then she remembered something her piano teacher had once told her years ago. Mistakes are not the end. They are part of the story, part of the music. She adjusted instantly, weaving the unexpected sound into the melody, transforming it into something even more beautiful. It was an instinct born of experience, of countless hours of practice, of learning to listen not only to the piano, but to herself. The audience did not notice the misstep at all. They only heard perfection, the seamless flow of her talent. Time seemed to blur as she continued playing. Minutes stretched and compressed, the world beyond the piano fading entirely. She could feel the music moving through her, an extension of her thoughts and emotions, a language more powerful than words. The room was filled with sound, yet it was not overwhelming. It was gentle, enveloping, drawing every listener into a shared moment of wonder. She played not to impress, not to prove, but simply to express, to communicate what had long been locked inside her. Every note was a declaration of her existence, her passion, and her courage. By the end of the second piece, the audience was completely silent for a heartbeat, caught between disbelief and admiration. Then slowly the clapping began, tentative at first, then building into a wave of genuine appreciation. Hands pounded on the backs of chairs, feet tapped, eyes shone with awe. The shy woman, unaware of the impact she had made, lowered her hands from the keys, her heart racing. She did not feel proud or boastful. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep personal joy that came from knowing she had faced her fear and let the music speak. She glanced briefly at the organizer, who was beaming, her excitement barely contained. "That was incredible," the organizer whispered, shaking her head. Even after she had stepped away from the piano, the energy in the room remained electric. People whispered to each other, recounting what they had just heard. Some tried to guess how long she had been practicing, what kind of training she had received, what made her music so powerful, but no explanation seemed sufficient. There was something almost magical about her performance, something that could not be measured in hours of practice or technical skill alone. It was the combination of talent, emotion, courage, and an inner world that few had ever glimpsed before. The shy woman retreated slightly, seeking the comfort of her corner again. But she noticed something she had not expected. People were looking at her differently. They were no longer seeing a timid, quiet observer. They were seeing a musician, a storyteller, a person who could command attention not with words but with the language of the piano. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had always wanted to share her music, but never like this. Never with so many watching, judging, waiting. Yet now, as she felt the warmth of their admiration, she realized that sharing her gift was not something to fear. It was something to embrace. For the first time, she understood that her music had the power to touch others in ways that words could not. That shy, reserved woman who had walked into the hall hoping to remain unnoticed had become a presence impossible to ignore. And though her journey was just beginning, she felt a new sense of possibility, a quiet determination that she had never allowed herself to feel before. Even as the next performer prepared to take the stage, the room buzzed with energy from her performance. People would talk about her long after the evening ended, but she did not need recognition. What mattered was that she had found her voice, had allowed herself to step into the light, and had touched hearts simply by being true to herself and her music. That was more than enough, and somewhere deep inside she felt a spark of courage that whispered gently, "This is only the beginning." As the shy woman returned to her seat, a strange calm washed over her. She could still feel the echo of the piano in her chest, like a heartbeat she had never known was hers, but the organizer was already leaning toward her, a subtle urgency in her eyes. Would you play one more?" she asked softly. The request was gentle but insistent. She hesitated, her fingers instinctively clenching and unclenching in her lap. Another performance? Another audience? Her mind screamed that she was not ready. And yet, a quiet voice inside, one she had ignored for so long, whispered back, "Yes. Yes, you can." She rose slowly, each step toward the piano deliberate, weighed with both fear and anticipation. The room seemed different now, more attentive. People had noticed her in a way she had never experienced. Eyes that had barely registered her presence before now followed her with curiosity and expectation. Some smiled softly, some whispered among themselves, but all of them were waiting for what would happen next. She could feel their attention pressing down on her, yet it did not paralyze her. Instead, it focused her. sharpening every sense, every instinct she had learned through years of solitary practice. As she reached the piano, she took a deep breath and placed her hands lightly on the keys. The familiar texture grounded her, reminded her of long nights spent alone, perfecting each note until it spoke exactly what she wanted. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the world fade. The audience, the lights, the expectations, they all vanished. In that moment, it was only her and the piano. She began to play. The first notes were gentle, delicate, almost a whisper. But there was a clarity to them, a precision that drew people in immediately. Even those who had only noticed her shy demeanor before now leaned forward, sensing something extraordinary. Her fingers moved with confidence yet softness, striking chords that resonated deeply, carrying emotion that seemed far beyond her years. Each note seemed deliberate, as if it had been waiting its turn to emerge into the room. The shy woman had become the conduit for something much larger than herself. As the piece progressed, she began to experiment subtly, weaving in gentle flourishes and unexpected transitions. The music was alive, moving in ways that seemed instinctive yet purposeful. Her heart raced with exhilaration and focus. Every note was a conversation, every chord a confession. People in the audience began to exchange glances, their astonishment growing with each measure. They had expected timid melodies, careful and polite, but this was something else entirely. It was as if the piano itself had been waiting for her to bring it to life. Some listeners sat completely still, eyes wide, taking in the depth of the sound. Others closed their eyes, letting themselves be carried away. They could feel the emotion, the subtle shifts in tempo, the gentle pauses that made the following chords even more powerful. The shy woman was telling stories without words, conveying experiences they had never known she had lived. Her music revealed vulnerability, strength, sorrow, and joy in ways that touched everyone present. She did not play for applause or recognition. She played because she could not do otherwise. It was a compulsion, a need, a gift she could no longer keep to herself. She felt the audience's response in subtle waves, though she did not look at them directly. The energy in the room was tangible. Each note she struck seemed to pull more of it toward her, creating a connection that transcended words. The shy woman, so accustomed to hiding in the background, was now at the center of attention, yet she did not feel exposed. Instead, she felt alive. She had discovered a power within herself she had never known, and the piano was the medium through which it flowed. The piece took a sudden turn, a crescendo that demanded her full attention. Her hands flew over the keys, precise and fast, yet each note retained its clarity. The audience gasped softly, recognizing the skill required to perform such a passage flawlessly. Her face remained calm, almost serene, but inside her heart raced with exhilaration. This was the point where mastery and emotion met, where years of quiet practice and inner strength manifested fully. She felt a surge of pride, not boastful but deeply personal. She had crossed a threshold she had never dared to approach before. Midway through the performance, a delicate, almost imperceptible pause came. Her fingers lingered on the keys, allowing the sound to resonate, letting the audience breathe and feel the depth of the moment. The silence was powerful, filled with anticipation. Then she continued, each note emerging with renewed clarity, flowing effortlessly from one to another. The music seemed to speak directly to every listener, touching emotions they did not realize had been waiting. Some eyes glistened with tears. Others remained wide with disbelief. No one moved. No one spoke. The room was suspended in a rare, almost sacred attention, entirely captivated by her. Her own emotions mingled with the music. She remembered nights spent alone, struggling with difficult passages, learning to coax every ounce of expression from her fingers. She remembered the fear she had always carried, the doubt that had whispered she was not ready, not good enough, not worthy. And now, in the midst of an audience she had once feared, she realized that fear had been a teacher, not a prison. Every anxious hour, every silent practice, every moment of hiding had prepared her for this. She felt gratitude for herself, for her persistence, for the courage that had brought her here. The audience responded not just to her technical skill, but to the depth of her feeling. The shy woman was no longer simply playing. She was revealing herself, allowing every hidden part of her personality, every secret hope and fear to resonate through the piano. They sensed her humanity, her struggle, her triumph. The contrast between the quiet, almost invisible woman they had first noticed and the commanding presence she had become only heightened their admiration. She had defied expectations, shattered assumptions, and created a space where emotion was more important than performance. Her fingers moved with increasing fluidity, the music swelling and retreating like waves. Each note was deliberate yet spontaneous, a perfect balance of control and expression. She felt herself entering a flow, a zone where everything else faded and only the music existed. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, and utterly exhilarating. She had always known she loved the piano, but she had never known this level of connection, this profound sense of being one with the instrument. Her shyness, her fear, her self-doubt, all of it had been absorbed and transformed by the music. As the final notes approached, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of the room's attention, to recognize the journey she had taken in the last minutes. The piece was coming to a close, but she did not rush it. Each chord was carefully considered, each pause intentional, each flourish a final flourish of self-expression. The shy woman who had entered the hall hoping to remain unseen had become a storyteller, a performer, a virtuoso in her own right. The transformation was undeniable. The last note lingered, hanging in the air like a fragile promise. The audience remained still for a heartbeat, suspended between awe and disbelief, as if unsure whether to break the spell. Then, slowly, softly, applause began. A few hands clapped tentatively at first, then more joined in until the entire room was filled with appreciation, cheers, and admiration. The shy woman lowered her hands from the keys, her chest heaving slightly, a quiet smile forming on her lips. She did not feel pride in the way others might expect. She felt fulfillment, a deep, quiet satisfaction that came from sharing her gift honestly and fearlessly. The organizer rushed over, her face alight with excitement. "That was incredible. Truly incredible," she said, shaking her head. The shy woman nodded, still catching her breath. Words were not necessary. The music had spoken everything, had revealed everything, and as she sat quietly, watching the reactions of those around her, she felt a profound sense of connection, not only with the audience, but with herself. She had discovered a part of herself that had been hidden, a strength and beauty that she had long denied. People came closer, some hesitant, some eager to speak, but all drawn by the extraordinary performance they had just witnessed. They asked questions, complimented her, expressed amazement at the depth and skill she had shown. The shy woman responded quietly, softly, almost as if embarrassed by the attention. Yet inside she felt a quiet pride. She had faced her fears, embraced the moment, and allowed the music to carry her beyond her own limitations. And in doing so, she had touched the hearts of everyone present. As she left the piano for a brief moment to rest, she realized something important. This experience, terrifying as it had been, had opened a door. The shy woman who had walked into the hall uncertain and invisible had taken her first step into a larger world. She had not only performed, she had revealed her true self, and the audience had recognized it. The music had spoken for her, and in doing so, it had begun a transformation that would continue long after the evening ended. For the first time, she felt a sense of belonging in a space she had always observed from the edges. She realized that being seen did not have to be frightening. It could be liberating. Sharing her music, once a source of anxiety, had become a source of joy and strength. The shy woman had discovered that the piano could not only express her emotions, but also reveal her courage, her resilience, and her unique voice. And as she looked around, the applause had barely settled when she felt the organizer gently nudge her. "One more piece," the woman whispered, almost pleading. The shy pianist hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she weighed the request. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, doubt, and a strange spark of excitement. Could she do it again? Could she push further into the spotlight she had never wanted? Yet deep inside, a quiet determination stirred. She had already faced the first wave of fear and survived. Maybe this was the moment to go even further, to see what she was truly capable of. She rose slowly, each step deliberate, almost ritualistic. The piano stood like an old friend, waiting patiently for her return. Her fingers brushed the keys, feeling their familiar texture, and for a moment she closed her eyes, letting the world around her disappear. The murmurs of the audience faded, the lights blurred, the pressure melted. All that remained was the music and the need to let it speak. She had no plan for this piece. It would come from her heart, from instinct, from years of private practice and untapped emotion. As she began, the first notes were soft, almost shy, delicate as a whisper. Yet there was an unmistakable clarity in them, a precision that immediately caught the audience's attention. They leaned forward, sensing that this was no ordinary performance. Each note seemed alive, vibrating with intention, emotion, and subtle complexity. The music flowed naturally, effortlessly, as if it had been waiting all these years for her to play it in front of the world. For the first time, the shy woman felt entirely in control, yet liberated. She was free, not constrained by fear or doubt. The melody grew, sweeping through the hall with a gentle intensity. Her fingers moved faster, yet never lost the softness and grace that gave her playing its unique character. She did not just play the notes. She infused them with feeling. A light touch here, a heavier chord there, subtle pauses that made the following sequences even more dramatic. All of it revealed a depth of understanding that stunned everyone listening. The room was silent, but the silence was not empty. It was full, alive, vibrating with the music and the raw talent of a woman who had hidden for far too long. She glanced briefly at the audience. Their faces were a mixture of shock, wonder, and disbelief. Some had their hands over their mouths. Others sat perfectly still, as though afraid to blink and break the spell. A few leaned forward, eyes wide, utterly captivated by the transformation before them. This shy, reserved woman who had seemed almost invisible moments ago had become a force impossible to ignore. Every note carried power and emotion. Every pause demanded attention. She was no longer just performing. She was telling a story, sharing herself in a way that words could never achieve. Her confidence grew as she played. The music became more expressive, more daring. She introduced subtle variations, slight improvisations that highlighted her creativity and mastery. Her fingers flew over the keys with precision, creating harmonies and rhythms that were both complex and beautiful. The audience gasped softly at moments of unexpected brilliance, at the way she could turn a simple passage into something extraordinary. It was not just skill. It was artistry, the kind that came from years of dedication, patience, and love for the craft. Every chord she struck seemed to pull the audience closer, drawing them into her world. They could feel her emotions in every note. The anxiety that had been present moments ago now transformed into courage. The hesitation now replaced by assurance. The quiet reserve, now blossoming into a full expression of her inner self. People exchanged looks of amazement, some shaking their heads, others with tears in their eyes. None of them had expected this. None had imagined that such depth, such talent could emerge from someone so shy and unassuming. Midway through the piece, she took a delicate pause. Her hands hovered over the keys, letting the last chord resonate fully, filling the room with a lingering warmth. In that moment of silence, the audience could feel the weight of the music, the gravity of the performance. It was a breathless pause, one that seemed to stretch time itself. Then she continued, each note flowing seamlessly into the next, more confident, more expressive than before. It was as if the music had taken control of her, guiding her fingers and her heart with a force stronger than fear or doubt. The crescendo approached. Her fingers moved faster, striking chords with both power and delicacy. The audience was caught in a wave of sound, unable to look away, unable to interrupt the spell she had cast. Every note told a story of struggle, of fear overcome, of hidden potential finally realized. She could feel the energy of the room, the collective attention of hundreds of eyes and ears focused entirely on her, and yet she did not feel pressured. She felt alive, connected, and powerful in a way she had never experienced before. As the climax of the piece unfolded, she allowed herself to play with abandon. Each chord was deliberate yet spontaneous, precise yet overflowing with emotion. The music rose and fell, danced and lingered, pulling the audience along an emotional journey they had not expected. They were silent witnesses to her brilliance, captivated by the juxtaposition of her quiet personality and the commanding force of her artistry. Whispers of astonishment began to ripple through the crowd, though no one wanted to break the spell by speaking too loudly. They were witnessing something rare, something remarkable. A shy woman revealing herself as a true virtuoso, almost against her own will. She felt a strange sense of release as she played. All the years of hiding, of practicing in secret, of doubting herself, seemed to fall away with each note. The music became a bridge between her inner world and the outer one, a language she had always understood but had rarely shared. She realized in a quiet, profound way that her gift had always been meant for moments like this, that her shyness had not been a limitation but a preparation. Every pause, every careful observation, every solitary practice session had led her here. The piece drew to a close. She let the final notes linger, allowing the sound to resonate fully through the room. Then slowly she lifted her hands from the keys. The room was silent for a heartbeat, as if no one dared to break the spell, and then the applause came, soft at first, hesitant, and then growing into a thunderous wave of admiration and awe. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, some even whistling. The shy woman sat quietly, her chest heaving, barely able to process the overwhelming response. She did not feel pride in the conventional sense. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep inner joy that came from knowing she had shared her true self without reservation. The organizer rushed forward, her face alight with excitement. "I have never seen anything like that," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "You are incredible, absolutely incredible." The shy woman nodded, barely able to meet her gaze. Words were unnecessary. The music had spoken for her. The audience continued to cheer, their admiration palpable, their astonishment unmistakable. People were talking to one another, asking how someone so reserved could play with such skill and emotion. There were murmurs about hidden talent, about natural genius, about the power of the piano to reveal the depths of the human soul. She retreated slightly to her corner, seeking the comfort of distance, yet she noticed that people were still watching her. Their eyes were filled with respect, curiosity, and wonder. She realized for the first time that being seen did not have to be frightening. It could be affirming, validating, even comforting. The shy woman who had once avoided attention was discovering that she could command it without losing herself. She could share her gift without fear. She could be herself and be celebrated for it. As she rested for a moment, the music lingering in her mind and heart, she felt a quiet excitement for what might come next. This performance had been transformative. It had changed her perception of herself and her potential. She had faced fear, embraced her talent, and shared it with others in a way she had never imagined. And she had done it on her own terms, letting the music guide her, letting it speak for her, allowing the audience to witness her emergence as something extraordinary. The evening continued, but the spell she had cast remained. People would talk about this shy woman for years, about the moment they had been present when she revealed herself as a true virtuoso. And she quietly would remember the thrill, the fear, the courage, and the joy that had carried her through each note. She had discovered something profound, that true talent does not need to be loud, does not need to announce itself. It simply exists, waiting for the right moment to shine. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine the possibilities. She could perform again. She could share her gift more widely. She could step into a world she had once feared, and find that it could be welcoming, even nurturing. The shy woman who had entered the hall with trepidation and doubt was no longer invisible. She was seen, heard, and felt. She had become a living testament to the power of courage, preparation, and the quiet persistence of talent nurtured in private. And as she looked around at the faces of those still in awe, she realized something even more important. She had not only performed, she had inspired. Her journey, her courage, her willingness to step forward despite fear had created a ripple in the hearts of those who witnessed it. People had been touched not just by the music but by the story it told. The story of a shy woman who refused to age. The applause from her previous pieces had barely settled when she found herself noticing something she had not expected. People were talking about her. Not in whispers of idle curiosity, but in tones full of amazement and admiration. She could hear fragments of conversation, words like incredible, talented, and virtuoso floating toward her. The shy woman who had entered the hall hoping to remain invisible felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride mingled with embarrassment, excitement mingled with fear. It was all new territory, and she wasn't entirely sure how to navigate it. People were approaching her cautiously, unsure if their intrusion would break the fragile bubble of confidence she had begun to cultivate. One woman, an older musician with kind eyes, approached and said softly, "You have a gift. I don't know where you've hidden it all these years, but it's extraordinary." The shy woman nodded, offering a quiet smile, her cheeks warming at the compliment. She didn't speak much, didn't know what to say, but she felt the words reach her deeply. They weren't just praise. They were recognition of a part of herself she had often kept hidden. a part she had almost forgotten existed. The room seemed to hum with energy, a mixture of lingering music, awe, and curiosity. People lingered near the piano, hesitant to move as if the air itself carried a sense of reverence. Even those who had come simply to enjoy the evening were now captivated, discussing in hushed tones the performance they had witnessed. They speculated about her background, her training, and her life outside of music, but she didn't feel the need to explain herself. She knew the truth. Her journey had been private, solitary, and deliberate. Every moment of fear, doubt, and quiet practice had led to this night, and it was enough that the music had spoken. The organizer approached once again, her eyes bright with excitement. "If you ever consider performing again," she said, leaning in, "there are many stages waiting for someone like you. People would come from everywhere to hear you play." The shy woman felt a mixture of thrill and hesitation. She had always avoided attention, had always feared judgment, yet something in the organizer's words resonated deeply. Maybe sharing her gift did not mean losing herself. Maybe it meant discovering a new part of who she could be. She simply nodded, feeling a flutter of possibility, a spark of courage that had been dormant for years. Meanwhile, the audience continued to buzz. People lingered, some approaching her shyly to ask questions, others simply standing back to absorb the energy of the evening. They were curious not only about her skill, but about the person behind the music. There was something captivating about the contrast between her quiet demeanor and the power she had shown on the piano. It was a reminder that greatness could emerge from the most unassuming places, that talent and humility could coexist in ways that inspired awe. As she returned to her seat in the corner, she felt her heart begin to calm. The adrenaline of performing was slowly fading, replaced by a reflective stillness. She allowed herself to consider what had just happened. For so long she had feared being seen, feared exposing her talent to judgment, criticism, or misunderstanding. Yet now, in the midst of applause and admiration, she realized that the act of sharing had been transformative. She had faced her fear, embraced her ability, and discovered a new strength within herself. Her thoughts drifted to the countless hours she had spent alone at the piano, practicing quietly while the world slept. Those hours had often been filled with frustration and doubt, with moments where she questioned whether she was truly capable or if her talent was enough. Yet every moment had mattered. Every note had built toward this experience. She realized that the shy, careful woman she had always been had not been a weakness. It had been preparation. The very quality that had made her hesitant in public had also allowed her to cultivate patience, precision, and deep emotional understanding. The energy in the room was contagious. People continued to approach, offering compliments and praise, yet there was a genuine warmth in their admiration. No one was trying to diminish her or push her into a role she didn't want. Instead, they were celebrating her talent, acknowledging the courage it had taken to step forward, and expressing genuine appreciation for the music she had shared. The shy woman felt a sense of belonging she had rarely experienced. She was no longer just an observer. She was a participant, recognized not for showiness but for authenticity. A few children lingered nearby, eyes wide with fascination. They whispered to their parents, asking how someone so quiet could play so beautifully. Their curiosity reminded her of the earliest days of her own musical journey, when she had first discovered the piano in a quiet corner of a music shop. She remembered the thrill, the awe, the feeling that she had found something that made the world make sense. Now she saw that spark reflected in the children's eyes, and it gave her a deep sense of joy. Music had the power to inspire, to move, and to create connections across generations. She noticed one young man lingering near the edge of the crowd, holding a notebook and sketching quietly. He did not approach, but he observed intently, capturing the essence of the performance in his own way. The shy woman felt a subtle connection to him, a recognition that art could take many forms, that the impact of music extended beyond sound and into imagination. It was a reminder that sharing her gift was not just about applause or recognition. It was about influence, about touching lives in ways she could never fully predict. Time seemed to stretch as she reflected on the evening. The performances continued, but the energy in the room had shifted. Her presence, her courage, and her music had left an indelible mark. People spoke in hushed, excited tones, recounting her talent and the unexpected depth she had revealed. For the first time, the shy woman realized that her ability to move people did not rely on her being outgoing or bold. It relied on honesty, skill, and the willingness to let herself be vulnerable. She had offered her true self, and the audience had recognized it. As she packed her sheet music into her bag, she allowed herself a small, private smile. The weight of the evening's anxiety had lifted, replaced by something lighter, something exhilarating. She felt a sense of pride that was quiet but profound, the kind that comes from knowing you have faced a challenge, stepped into the unknown, and emerged stronger. The shy woman who had once avoided attention now understood that her gift could not remain hidden forever. Sharing it, even in small, carefully chosen ways, could be transformative, not only for those who listened, but for herself. She lingered in her corner, observing the lingering reactions of the audience. People continued to talk about her performance, replaying the melodies in their minds, remembering the subtle nuances, the crescendos, the delicate pauses that had made the music unforgettable. Some approached the piano once more, tracing the keys with curiosity, trying to imagine the skill and dedication required to create such a performance. Others simply sat back, content to carry the memory of the evening with them, a quiet awe lingering long after the last note had faded. The organizer returned, now with a small group of local musicians who had been inspired by the shy woman's performance. They spoke excitedly about the possibility of future collaborations, of creating more opportunities for her to share her talent. The shy woman listened, absorbing their words, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had never considered a life where music could lead her to new connections, new experiences, and new recognition. Yet the possibility felt thrilling, almost intoxicating. Even as the evening wound down, the impact of her performance remained. People lingered in the hall, reluctant to leave, drawn by the lingering memory of the music and the quiet strength of the performer. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, a recognition that the shy woman she had always been could coexist with the musician she had just revealed herself to be. It was a delicate balance, one she would continue to explore, but it was a balance she now understood was possible. As she finally prepared to leave, the shy woman noticed the way the audience looked at her, not with judgment but with admiration and respect. For the first time, she understood that being seen could be empowering, that stepping into the light did not require changing who she was at her core. Her talent, her dedication, her patience, and her quiet nature had all contributed to this moment, and they would continue to shape her path forward. She walked out of the hall slowly, carrying her bag and sheet music, yet feeling lighter than she had in years. The music of the evening still resonated in her mind, a reminder of what was possible when fear was faced with courage, when talent was shared with honesty, and when a shy, quiet soul chose to reveal itself. She had begun to understand that her journey was just beginning. The shy woman who had once hesitated at the edge of the spotlight had now discovered a new world of possibility, recognition, and connection through her music. The evening left her with a sense of clarity. She realized that sharing her talent was not about performing for accolades or approval. It was about connection, about reaching hearts, about letting music communicate what words could not. She had discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. And she had discovered that the shy woman she had always been could coexist with the virtuoso she had revealed herself to be. The shy woman stepped out of the hall into the cool evening air, carrying her piano bag with quiet determination. Her heart was still pounding, but not from fear. It was a steady, warm rhythm, echoing the music she had shared and the courage she had found within herself. For years she had hidden in the shadows, keeping her gift to herself, afraid that the world would not understand or appreciate it. But tonight had changed everything. She had revealed herself not as she feared the world would see her, but as she truly was, a musician, an artist, a person with a voice that could move hearts. Walking home, she replayed the evening in her mind. Every note she had played, every subtle shift in tempo, every delicate pause, it all felt vivid, almost tangible. She could still feel the weight of the audience's attention, the collective energy that had surrounded her, and the quiet thrill of knowing that she had not only met their expectations, but surpassed them in ways even she had not imagined. The shy woman had always been careful, always hesitant, always reluctant to step forward. And yet tonight she had done the impossible. She had shared herself fully, without apology, without fear. She remembered the faces in the audience, the surprise, the awe, the admiration. It had been more than applause. It had been recognition, the acknowledgement of her talent, her courage, her authenticity. People had not just heard her music, they had felt it. They had been drawn into her world, into her emotions, into her story, without her saying a single word. And that was something extraordinary. She had always believed that her music belonged only to her, confined to the walls of her room, to the solitude she had always sought. But now she understood that music, like courage, grows when it is shared. That night, as she lay in bed, she could not stop thinking about the reactions of those who had witnessed her performance. She recalled the older musician who had praised her gift, the children who had stared in wonder, the young artist quietly sketching her performance, and the audience that had been captivated by every note. She realized that her music had done more than entertain. It had inspired. It had stirred emotions, sparked curiosity, and left an imprint on people's hearts. The shy woman who had once doubted her own worth finally saw the impact of her courage. The days that followed brought a whirlwind of attention she had never expected. Invitations came from small venues, local music schools, and even community events. People who had attended her performance shared their amazement with friends and colleagues, spreading stories of the shy woman who could make a piano sing like no one else. Each message of encouragement, each request for another performance reinforced something she had begun to understand. Her music mattered. It could reach beyond her, touch lives, and inspire others. Even with the newfound attention, she remained true to herself. She did not seek fame or adoration. She sought connection, the same deep human connection she had experienced that night in the hall. She continued to practice diligently, not for the audience, but for the love of the music itself. The piano remained her sanctuary, her voice, her companion, and yet she also embraced the opportunities to share, to step forward, to let her music speak to the world. With each performance, her confidence grew, and with it, her understanding of who she was becoming. One evening, she received an invitation to perform at a larger event, a gathering of musicians from across the region. It was a prestigious opportunity, far beyond anything she had imagined for herself. At first, fear crept in, familiar and insistent, warning her of failure and exposure. But then she remembered the thrill of the last performance, the joy of letting herself be seen, the transformation she had experienced. This was her chance to embrace her full potential, to honor the gift she had long hidden, and to inspire a larger audience. When the day of the performance arrived, she felt the familiar rush of nerves. The hall was vast, filled with people she did not know, each with their own expectations, their own judgments. But as she approached the piano, she remembered something profound. Fear was no longer her master. Music was her guide, her sanctuary, her voice. She sat, closed her eyes for a moment, and let the first notes flow naturally. The melody emerged effortlessly, infused with the emotion and depth she had cultivated over years of practice and self-discovery. The audience was captivated from the first chord. They could sense her sincerity, her courage, her vulnerability. It was not just technical skill that amazed them. It was the way she communicated through every note, every pause, every nuance. She had become a storyteller, and the piano was her language. People leaned forward in their seats, silent, drawn into the emotional journey she was leading them on. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched in awe, unable to comprehend the depth of her talent. As she played, she realized that she was no longer the shy, hesitant woman who had entered that first hall so long ago. She had transformed, not into someone loud or boastful, but into someone who embraced her talent fully, who allowed herself to shine while remaining true to her nature. She had learned that courage was not about erasing fear but acting in spite of it. She had discovered that sharing her gift could be a source of joy, connection, and fulfillment. And with every note, she celebrated that discovery. The performance reached its climax, a series of notes that demanded both technical precision and emotional depth. Her fingers moved with fluidity and grace, each chord resonating deeply within the hall. The audience was silent, enraptured by the virtuosity before them. When the final note lingered in the air, a hush fell over the room as if everyone were holding their breath, reluctant to break the magic of the moment. Then a wave of applause erupted, filling the hall with cheers, admiration, and awe. People rose to their feet, some whistling, some clapping, all celebrating the rare gift they had witnessed. The shy woman lowered her hands from the keys, her chest heaving, a quiet smile playing on her lips. She did not feel pride in the conventional sense. She felt a deep personal fulfillment. She had faced fear, embraced her talent, and shared herself fully. She had transformed the way people saw her, but more importantly, she had transformed the way she saw herself. She realized that the shy, quiet woman she had once been was not a limitation, but a foundation, a part of her journey that had allowed her to develop patience, emotional depth, and authenticity. In the days and weeks that followed, her life began to change in subtle but profound ways. Invitations to perform continued to grow, from small community events to larger venues. People sought her out not only for her skill, but for the sincerity and emotion she brought to her music. Teachers, students, and fellow musicians were inspired by her journey, by the courage it took to step forward, and by the beauty of her performances. Yet she remained grounded, practicing diligently, maintaining the quiet discipline that had always been her strength. She also discovered something she had never anticipated. The impact of her courage extended beyond music. Friends and acquaintances began to notice a change in her demeanor. She walked taller, spoke more freely, and allowed herself to be present in social situations in ways she had previously avoided. The shy woman had learned that embracing her talent and stepping into the light could transform not only her artistic life but her personal life as well. Confidence, she realized, was not something imposed from the outside. It was cultivated from within, nurtured by small acts of bravery, dedication, and honesty. One afternoon, she received a letter from a young student who had attended one of her performances. The letter was filled with admiration, gratitude, and hope. The student wrote about being inspired to pursue music despite self-doubt and fear, sharing how witnessing her courage had given them the strength to try. The shy woman read the letter multiple times, tears welling in her eyes. She had never imagined that her music could touch someone else's life so profoundly. It was a reminder that her journey was not just about personal growth. It was about connection, inspiration, and the ripple effect of courage and authenticity. As the years went on, she continued to perform, to practice, and to share her gift with the world. Each performance reinforced the lessons she had learned, that fear could be transformed into courage, that shyness did not preclude greatness, and that authenticity was more powerful than any act of showmanship. She had become a symbol of quiet strength, a reminder that talent nurtured with patience, courage, and honesty could shine in ways that inspired and moved countless others. The shy woman had discovered her true voice, both on the piano and within herself. She had learned that stepping forward, even when terrified, could unlock extraordinary potential. She had found that music could communicate emotions words often failed to express, and that sharing one's gift could be transformative not only for the audience but for oneself. Her journey had begun in solitude and hesitancy, but it had led to connection, admiration, and the realization that courage and authenticity were inseparable from true artistry. And in that quiet, reflective space, she understood something fundamental. Her journey would never truly end, because each performance, each note, each act of sharing her music was part of a larger story. Her story. She had emerged from the shadows, revealing herself not as someone extraordinary by accident, but as someone who had faced fear, embraced her gift, and